Welcome to Soul Therapy with Chelle. I am Chelle Griffin and I practice as a soul doula. I combine therapeutic knowledge and lived experience with a healthy dose of spiritual exploration. Feel welcome to join me as we learn and grow together, exploring the magic and wonderment of experiencing life on earth as a spiritual being. Welcome back to Soul Therapy with Chelle, and we have part 2 of what started out as a book review but is quickly turning into, I guess you might call it a masterclass. So let's see where part 2 takes us. In this section, we're covering the myth of getting over it and mother hunger. So grief, as Hope Edelman writes, is not a state we leave behind. It's a landscape we learn to live within. And yet for so many daughters, there's a quiet pressure to just simply move on. Society loves a clean arc. Loss, recovery, closure. But grief rarely obeys such neat choreography. In Motherless Daughters, Edelman describes how loss resurfaces at every life stage through marriage, birth, illness, aging. Each new threshold reawakens the old separation. She says that the intervals between our grief responses may lengthen, but the longing never disappears. It hovers, patient, waiting for the next invitation to be felt. In Gestalt therapy, we call this the cycle of experience. Every emotion, every impulse seeks completion, contact, expression, and then rest. When grief is interrupted, though, because the world tells us to be strong, or because we fear that feeling, or because we fear that feeling will destroy us, the cycle remains unfinished. The energy of sorrow stays stored in the body, whispering for release in subtle ways, in tension, in overwork, in the quiet exhaustion of always keeping it together. Gestalt invites us to re-enter that cycle consciously, feel what was left unfelt, to bring awareness to the sensations that signal old pain returning, like the tightening throat, the ache between the eyes, the restlessness that rises without name. Because awareness, more than anything, is the beginning of change. When I first allowed myself to revisit the grief I had long denied, not just for my daughter, but for the living mother who had just stepped away. It felt like walking back into a storm I'd spent years outrunning. And yet, when I stood still long enough, I realized the storm had softened. I wanted to teach me how to breathe inside that storm, not beyond it. Edelman reminds us that grief is cyclical, but it's also creative. Each time it returns, it offers new insight, a new piece of integration. And this is where Gestalt therapy becomes a companion rather than a method. It doesn't tell us to analyze grief. It asks us to meet it, to stay present, what is, not what should be. Now let's talk about mother hunger. Edelman uses this phrase to describe the deep, persistent yearning for the kind of nurturing that only a mother or a truly attuned caregiver can provide. It's not simply missing your mum. It's the ache for unconditional safety, for that place inside, someone where you never had to earn your right to exist. She writes that for many people, many women in particular, this hunger becomes a lifelong companion, We may try to satisfy it through relationships, work, spirituality, or even caretaking others. But the truth is, no external source can permanently fill that absence. Only awareness can transform it. Gestalt therapy sees this hunger as unfinished contact, something in us still reaching out, still waiting for the touch, the voice, the presence that says, "You're safe now." Rather than judging the longing, we bring it into the present moment. We give it a seat at the table. We might even speak to it. "What are you asking of me today?" Sometimes that hunger says, "Feed me with gentleness." Sometimes it says, "Rest." And sometimes it whispers, "Please stop pretending you're okay." When we meet that voice with compassion rather than suppression, it begins to change shape. The ache doesn't disappear, but it transforms from emptiness into guidance. It points us back toward what we truly need: connection, expression, permission to be held. I often think of this process as remothering, not in the sense of replacing the mother we lost, but in learning to embody the qualities we once sought externally, to be curious instead of critical, to soothe instead of silence, to honor the child part that still believes she must perform for love. Gestalt invites us to do this not as an intellectual exercise, but as lived awareness. When the longing rises, instead of numbing it, we breathe into it. We feel where it lives in the body, the chest, the throat, maybe the belly. We stay present. And in doing so, we create new neural pathways of safety, the kind of safety that says, "I can hold myself now." Edelman wrote that many women only begin to heal when they stop expecting closure, because closure implies something ends, but love doesn't end, and neither does grief. They coexist, weaving through each other like tides. To me, that's where the sacred lives, in the coexistence, in the permission to love what was, even as we create what is. In Gestalt, we call this paradoxical change, the idea that we change most when we finally allow ourselves to be exactly as we are. When we stop fighting the longing, it softens. When we stop insisting on healing, healing begins, because awareness itself is a form of love. So if you notice that same hunger stirring in you, the wish for a mother's presence, the desire to be seen without needing to earn it, don't rush to fill it. Just acknowledge it, because that recognition is already an act of care. And care, even when self-given, is the language of healing, with the body as a keeper of grief and Gestalt integration. Edelman once observed that the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. Every emotion we've ever suppressed leaves an imprint. For many motherless daughters, that imprint shows up as tension across the chest, fatigue, digestive unease, or the sudden sting of tears that arrive without warning. In Gestalt therapy, we see the body as the bridge between awareness and the unconscious. It holds the stories that words can't yet shape. When we begin to listen to those sensations without analyzing or judging, we reopen the pathway to completion. When I finally allowed myself to notice where grief lived in me, it was in my throat. That tightness that always came when I wanted to cry but swallowed it instead. I'm sure you've heard my throat constrict in while I'm working my way through this episode. When I breathed into it, images surfaced. Sitting in hospital light, holding my newborn alone. The phone that never rang. The letter that never came. Each memory carried its own texture. Warm, heavy, raw. By staying with the sensations, not running from them, something inside began to move. That movement was the beginning of release. Gestalt calls this embodied awareness. It isn't about talking about feelings, it's about contacting them as they arise in the present moment. When we bring curiosity to the body, what am I noticing right now? We give the nervous system permission to trust us again. We become safe within ourselves. Sometimes I guide clients to imagine the body as a landscape. Where is it stormy? Where is it still? Where might there be new growth after the rain? That simple visual shifts grief from something we endure to something that can transform us. Hope Edelman wrote that grief revisits us at thresholds. Each life transition brings back the earlier separation and asks for a new response. Our bodies signal those moments long before our minds catch up through restlessness, insomnia, sunbursts of creativity, or fatigue. The body is saying, it's time to feel again. So rather than fearing those physical signals, we can greet them with gentleness, place a hand on the heart, breathe into the space beneath the ribs and whisper inwardly, I'm listening now. This act of attention is the essence of Gestalt contact. It transforms the body from archive to ally. Now let's speak of integration. Integration is the weaving together of what has been split apart, the meeting of sorrow and strength, loss and life. It's the moment the daughter who survived begins to sit beside the woman who thrives, and they realize they are the same person. In Gestalt terms, integration happens through awareness of opposites. The part that wants to cling and the part that wants to move on. The part that blames and the part that forgives. When we allow both to exist, a third thing emerges. Wholeness. Edelman tells the story of women who, years after their mother's deaths, began to notice small ways they were living differently. Cooking the same recipes, speaking with similar intonations, catching themselves in the mirror and seeing their mother's expression reflected back. They realized grief had slowly become guidance. Their mothers lived through them in gestures, phrases, instincts. That's integration. The loss no longer something to overcome, but something to live with tenderly. Gestalt therapy encourages daily practices of awareness to support this. Here are 3 that I often share. Number 1 is grounding through the senses. When waves of sadness arrive, name aloud what you see, hear, and feel in the present environment. It re-anchors you in now, reminding the body that the grief is old, even if the emotion feels immediate. Number 2 is dialogue with the missing presence. You might want to sit across from an empty chair for this and imagine your mother or the energy of mother Speak what was left unsaid. Then change chairs and answer as her. Allow an intuition to guide the words. Now, if things are feeling really raw and you're fairly new on this path of grieving your mother in any which way, this might be best done in a therapeutic setting with a professional. Listen to what you know you need. This Gestalt dialogue can soften the hard edges of unfinished business. And number 3 is creating ritual. Light a candle, cook a meal she once made, play a song she loved, or write a letter to the younger you who survived. Ritual gives grief a container. It moves feeling into form. These acts are not about closure. They're about connection. They remind us that love and loss are threads of the same tapestry. In my own practice, I've seen how returning to the senses, to movement, to the simple act of naming what is, can loosen the grip of old pain. The body exhales, the shoulders drop, the breath deepens, and we realize we're safe to live again. Edelman wrote, that insight is our gift, memory our guide. Awareness allows us to carry both without being drowned by either. That's the invitation of Gestalt, to hold paradox with compassion, to stand at the meeting point of what was and what is, and to say both belong, to come to a point of acceptance. As we move into the final part of this episode, we'll explore what it means to reclaim the mother within, to embody the nurturing qualities that we once sought outside of ourselves, and how relationships begin to change when we do. We'll also close with a short ritual, a moment of breath and light to honour the mothers we lost, in body or in bond, and the daughters we still are becoming. When I think about what a mother offers, I often think of reflection, not the literal reflection in a mirror, but the reflection that happens through her eyes, the look that says, see you, you exist, you are mine. Hope Edelman writes about this in a way that feels both tender and heartbreaking. She notes that a mother's gaze is the first mirror of identity, the way a daughter begins to know herself as someone worthy of love. When that mirror disappears, be it through death, abandonment, silence, or emotional unavailability, a girl learns to piece herself together from fragments. She might build her identity through performance, perfection, or productivity. She becomes the one who never fails, never complains, never reveals the longing. Because if the first mirror shattered, she learns to become her own reflection, but without the warmth that was meant to surround it. In Gestalt therapy, we understand self as a process, a living, shifting organism formed in relationship. Who we are emerges in contact with another. Without a steady mirror, the self becomes adaptive, fluid, sometimes chameleon-like. We become experts in reading the room, sensing the needs of others, molding ourselves to fit. And yet, beneath all that adaptation, there's a quiet whisper. Who am I when no one is watching? For a long time, that was the question I avoided. I had become so skilled at being what others needed, therapist, partner, mother, friend, that I'd forgotten how to simply be Chelle. Gestalt work reminded me that identity isn't something we discover once and keep. It's something we create in every moment of awareness. Each time I notice my breath, each time I feel the ground beneath my feet, I'm returning to myself. Edelman shares stories of daughters who only began to meet their true selves decades after the loss. When they finally stopped performing and started feeling, they realized that grief had been shaping them all along, quietly influencing their choices, their fears, their strengths. In Gestalt terms, we might call this integrating polarities. These are the parts of us we've split apart to survive. The strong one meets the fragile one. The caretaker meets the child. The silence meets the scream. And when those parts finally see each other, something miraculous happens. We begin to feel whole, not perfect, but whole. There's a line from Motherless Daughters that I love. A motherless daughter may grow up fast, but she never outgrows the need for a mother's love. It's such a simple truth, and yet it's one so many of us try to outthink. We tell ourselves, I'm fine, I don't need anyone, I've moved on. But the body remembers. It holds the memory of being held or not held. And that memory calls to us through our relationships, our dreams, even our art. Gestalt therapy invites us to listen to those calls without judgment, to bring the story out of the head and into the present moment, to let the daughter speak. Sometimes when I sit with clients who carry this wound, I'll gently ask, what does the little girl in you need to hear right now? Often she just needs to be told that it's okay to be tired of being strong. Strength, after all, is often a mask for longing. And longing is not weakness. It's proof that our capacity for love survived the loss. Edelman reminds us that grief isn't something we finish. It's something we grow around. Each milestone becomes a chance to meet the grief anew. Not to relive it, but to live alongside it. To let it become part of our wisdom. That, to me, is what Gestalt calls integration. The art of saying, yes, this too belongs. So if you're listening right now and recognizing yourself in these words, the daughter who learned to be strong, the woman who still feels a flicker of ache when she sees a mother and child laughing in a cafe, I want you to know this. You are not broken for missing what you never had. You are human for wanting it still. This completes part 2 of our episode or masterclass, and I look forward to welcoming you back next week for part 3, our final part of working with the amazing text that is Motherless Daughters by Hope Edelman. Thank you for showing up for yourself by listening to Soul Therapy with Chelle. Feel welcome to subscribe to my podcast, share the pod with your friends, family, colleagues and neighbours, and please, if you are willing, I would absolutely love a 5-star review to give my little pod a boost in the algorithms. For further detail on how to work with me, please visit my website www.chellegriffin.com or find me on the socials. I hope you'll join me on my next episode. Till then, go gently and intentionally. With care, Chelle.